Okay, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Benetech Service Net webinar. We're going to spend some time today sharing a quick overview of the Bay Area Sacramento Service Net project Benetech has been working on with a few partners, recap our very first stakeholder convening, and fill you in on the next steps and how to get involved. I just want to let everybody know that we are recording this session right now, and we'll make this recording available to folks in the near future so that you can share it with your colleagues, etc. So my name is Ann Bowie. I am the VP of Benetech Labs, and just for those who aren't familiar with Benetech, Benetech is a software for social good nonprofit based here in Palo Alto, California, and Benetech Labs is where we experiment and prototype of new applications of technology that we think will have big social impact. And we do that through the lens of community and collaboration in order to arrive at what we hope to be collective impact. And the problem that we are fundamentally trying to solve with the Service Net project is really a foundational one. And that is that the social safety net is hard to see. It's still too difficult for people to know what resources or services are really available to them, and to those who are really the most in need of essentials such as safe shelter, food, mental health care, etc. And when we say, what information about services are available, we mean some really fundamental information that one might think of as fairly basic and may seem pretty simple to come by. But it's surprisingly not. Because to make that information useful, it's got to be rich, it's often nuanced, and it's got to be highly relevant and accurate for the person who's looking for that information. So what information are we talking about? We're talking about basic information as in what service or resources available to you, food, shelter, training, etc., when and where and how you would get those services. What's the real-time capacity and availability of those services? How many beds are available that night? How many boxes of food is a given food pantry making available that day? Information about who's eligible, specific eligibility criteria like, are you an immigrant, a veteran, a senior? What's your family status? How old are you? And specific requirements that don't necessarily come to demographic eligibility, but maybe things as simple as making sure you have a photo ID with you when you attempt to receive those services. And then that's part and parcel of information about how to receive services, application processes, who are the most effective contacts within an organization to actually make sure that you can navigate through that organization and get that service. All of this information really requires knowledge, expertise, sometimes specialization, and if it's done really right, it's really foundational. Without access to the right information, you can't connect people to the right services efficiently. And it's this information this is what we're talking about. It's the essential complement to other also important data sharing projects that are underway and are getting started now throughout the country, really, where people are talking about tracking things like specific clients through the safety net, being able to do warm handoffs, closing the loop on the referral process. There's a lot of interest in data around the social safety net and how it's used. And this is one of those core fundamental components of that. So as you saw, that data can be pretty nuanced. So ServiceNet really recognizes that the ecosystem is full of expertise already. There are lots of organizations that are now maintaining resource directory info. Some are specializing, whether regionally or by type of service or type of person that they're trying to help. But what if all these folks could share that data so that no matter who they're helping and how, whether through a hotline, an app, a one-on-one visit, etc., they all had access to real-time and accurate information that reflects the expertise and knowledge of the whole community? And what if this new data were actually more efficiently and cost-effectively maintained than what is currently maintained now across many siloed resource directories? So ServiceNet is really about building technical infrastructure to enable that kind of collaboration, inspired by the standards work of the Open Referral Initiative, one of our partners. It's open source, integration focused, it's really a back-end system to fuel front-end systems for the techies amongst you. We believe that ServiceNet has broad applicability to many different regions, that this collaborative model that we're looking at is applicable not just in the Bay Area, but we're starting right here in our own backyard in the San Francisco Bay Area and Sacramento. This is a complex region, as many of you know, with many stakeholder organizations doing really amazing work, which is why we're so excited by the participation and partnership of so many of those organizations. So last month, on the 20th and 21st of February, we held our first ever Bay Area Sacramento Service Net convening. It was sponsored by Kaiser Permanente, whose Northern California Community Benefits Program has been a lead sponsor of ServiceNet thus far, as we're getting going. And we had 45 participants from 21 organizations, including government, 211 providers, healthcare-based referral providers, online referral system providers, legal aid providers, social workers, researchers, and others. At the table were executive directors, senior management, resource directory managers, program managers, and also technical folks. And the point of the meeting was really for all of us to get together to discuss opportunities and next steps for improving the accessibility, availability, the reliability, and ultimately sustainability of really good information about the safety net in this region. And the 2 days were really an opportunity for us to do both some discovery work amongst each other, learning about each other, what we do, how we may complement each other, and about what's happening now. And then also creating actionable next steps towards a new future. So what were some of the outcomes of that meeting? So the first category comes out of that the segment of the meeting that we're really focused on discovery. And so as a group, we spent some time, you see some pictures of some truly heroic Post-it note activity that was happening that first day. Where we shared practices for maintaining and using data. We confirmed a lot of shared challenges with services data maintenances, that it can be hard, time consuming, resource intensive, that it is a nuanced effort with true expertise required. We explored potential cooperative solutions and really importantly, the impact of those solutions. What does this infrastructure and collaboration, what could they help us achieve in the long term? That really is part of the end goal of so many of these organizations. And then we also reviewed the first ever data analysis that compares multiple resource directories in the San Francisco, Sacramento Bay Area that are currently being maintained as separate silos to see the state of service directories and service information now. And I want to start by sharing some high-level overview of that analysis to give you a sense of what the baseline we came in together was. So what we did was we found 11 different data sets partnering with a variety of organizations across the Bay Area and Sacramento. 11 data sets, mostly information and referral services such as 211s. We focused it, and then we focused on services with distinct geographic locations. So services that actually have a presence geographically that we could map versus those that are virtual, such as a hotline. And these could be things, anything from a food pantry to a shelter, a care program, a training program, et cetera. We applied a matching algorithm to distinguish from 35,000 total records about services to distinguish approximately 15,500 unique service providers out of those 35,000 records and across those 11 data sets. And here you're looking at a map where each one of those locations is mapped as a blue dot. And then we said, let's take a closer look. And we validated a suspicion that many of us have already had, that in fact, 74% of the records about services that were being maintained in these 11 directories, 74% were actually being maintained duplicatively. That is, by more than one organization. So more than one organization reaching out to a service provider and maintaining information about the services that provider provides. And conversely, that 26% of the records were uniquely held by one organization. So what we have here is really a double-sided opportunity. First, to reduce the duplication of effort so that organizations don't have to take on all that time-consuming task of maintaining this data. Each one of them doesn't have to do that. And the other opportunity is to make available more information so that services currently only visible to one organization become visible to all organizations. So no one seeking help misses an opportunity because they happen to go through a different front door. And so what you see here is a map representing that level of duplication. The warmer the color, so as we move into red, the more duplication across multiple sets. And one caveat here, of course, is that this just represents 11 data sets. There are, of course, many other data sets covering the regions that are covered by this map here. The third layer of analysis that we undertook looked at the content of these records about services. So this was more of a manual process. And here's a really very simple example of what we found. Here are 2 records out of 4 total that across 11 data sets for the Larkin for Youth, which is a shelter providing services for those 18 to 24 in San Francisco. You can see here that while both organizations that maintain these records about the same service provider, while they both maintain the same record, they have slightly different information in each. Combining the records and the expertise behind them could provide the basis for a richer view of what's available and to whom. And these differences, as you can imagine, were fodder for a lot of important discussions at the convening about the breadth and depth of the records and the audience for the information that's being captured here. So there is uniqueness across the sets, and understanding the whys and wherefores of that uniqueness is important to understanding how we would collaborate on this information. So after doing some of that discovery and really getting to dig into some of that data, we spent some time really identifying the opportunities that come out of it. So it's as a follow-on to the discovery process, we're looking at what are some next steps, what are some opportunities that we can seize. A key part of that discussion around opportunities, of course, centered on the benefits of a collaborative system could be. What is the benefit of maintaining service-directed information in a collaborative way in order so that we can really talk about the impact and the value proposition that can guide this work. And ultimately, of course, for everyone in the room, this is about helping folks in need. So if we can improve the data, we are providing a foundation for better service delivery, a better way to connect people to the right services. And then, of course, an incredibly important part of this as well is operational benefits that translate into all of us collectively being able to do more for people in need. And those operational benefits were pretty straightforward: increased efficiency, reducing duplication, and improving data quality, increasing the comprehensiveness and accuracy and relevancy of the information available to everyone, more effective resource allocation. So if we can be more efficient and can reduce duplication, can we then have an opportunity for for funding to be reallocated to other valuable services that all of the organizations are providing. And then finally, we all wanted to consider a scalable, replicable model that would translate to other regions as well, bringing the benefits to more people than those who were here just here in the Bay Area and Sacramento. So those are the opportunities. Of course, with all opportunities come challenges. And so we spent time thinking about what are the challenges that might be in the way. And of course, the first step in addressing challenges is to really identify them as clearly as you can. And so these emerged as some of those key things that were identified. Incentivizing stakeholders all up and down the ecosystem, not only those who were in the room that day, but also others. Understanding and measuring impact, of course. Again, we talked about different data for different audiences, understanding how to shape information so that it is the most useful for the person who needs it. Valuing and recognizing the expertise required. Of course, competing priorities in a highly resource-constrained environment is a perennial topic amongst nonprofits, and that continues to be the case. Sustainability. If we are to build something like this, if we are to collaborate, how do we sustain such a collaboration, and how much will that take? And then, of course, the definition of roles and responsibilities for various stakeholders. There are lots of stakeholders to be accounted for, and understanding how we best play to our strengths is important. But ultimately, to address these challenges, we're trying to do this through the lens of collaboration and community. And collaboration really begins with trust. And this was an important theme, maybe one of the most important themes to emerge from the meeting, is how much of the work of the meeting was trust building. And I wanted just to share a couple of quotes that we received as we were gathering feedback after the meeting. One from a participant that was with a referral service that said, the Service Net convening represented what I find is the most exciting and progressive work we can do around resource data. I felt re-energized in my personal mission around doing this work as we built trust, vision, and solidarity amongst our colleagues. And then another quote from a service provider said, I was impressed with how involved everyone got in the discussions and how open and honest everyone was about what their personal challenges were. Looking forward to further discussion and work with this group. Both of these quotes really reflect the importance of trust to the conversation and how the convening helped lay the foundation for trust building. And we think that's a really essential part of the process, essential for continued momentum as people think about what to do together next. And we're really, really grateful for all those participants who really did lay bare what their challenges were in a room of potential competitors, in a room of colleagues that they may not have spent a lot of time with before. They were still willing to be really open about the challenges so that we could come to solutions together. And that was an enormously heartening outcome of this convening. So I think that momentum that comes with that collaboration building and that trust building really gives us the drive to kind of move forward to the next steps. So there were two kinds of next steps coming from this. The first was that the group identified 4 ongoing discussions on key infrastructure components and collaborative models. And then, of course, as Benetech, we have some system design and prototyping to be done on Service Net, which encompass our next steps as well. So I'm going to now turn it over to a few of my colleagues to talk about some of those next steps in a little bit more depth. So the first person is Greg Bloom, and I'm going to ask each person to just, with one very brief sentence, identify yourself before jumping into your topic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Greg Bloom. I lead up the Open Referral Initiative. Happy to talk more about the work that we're doing in California and in other communities around the country to help organizations find new ways to share and publish resource directory information. This is all super exciting. So this was a conversation, a breakout group that we had specifically around the question of if we are going to have some sort of system through which we will share data, then how can we account for contributions and value those contributions so that people who do work maintaining data that gets used by others can sustain that work? That was essentially the question. And so we have 2 things that we're going to be doing to explore this question. The first is identifying the baseline. So we'll be collecting data from each of the groups that contributed data for Benetech's comparative analysis that we saw a little bit earlier. John Higgins will be leading the process of checking back with those groups and getting a sense from them of how much time and other costs they invest in maintaining data currently, how often they're updating, we'll see if we can get some metric for the investment of human resources that currently goes into each respective directory. And I think there's a second follow-up bonus question that will go through that survey, which is, if you had the ability to use that time in some other way, how would you reallocate it? What else would you do with this time if it was freed up? So that's on the baseline economic analysis tip. I am also looking into a sort of super nerdy question. We have a bunch of folks who are interested in exploring this, about empirical instances, empirical examples of systems in which many different data producers get compensated for their contributions. And we're going to be looking both within the field of information referral. We have an example in Ontario where Ontario, Canada has 44 different local and/or topic-specific referral providers, and they're all a part of a network, and they each contribute updates to their catchment area, their designated set of data, and they get compensated for those updates. So I'm going to try to learn more about that system and report back to the group. And there are also examples of value accounting systems in other fields, and so I found some essays if anybody wants to read kind of boring essays about commons-based peer production accounting systems. I would welcome additional folks to join us in this thought, in this path of inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Next up, to talk about the role of funders in government, we have Sandy. Sandy, are you on the line?
Oh, sorry, I had to unmute myself as well. Hi, this is Sandy, and I'm on the line. How are you?
Great. How are you? Please go ahead and introduce yourself and
Great.
Tell us more about your discussion.
Okay, hi, everybody. My name is Sandy Steer, and I work for Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency, which is an agency that encompasses public health, environmental health, indigent health, and behavioral health care in Alameda County, which is in the Bay Area. And I'm the Information Systems Director there. And my role in this particular project is to talk about how government and other funders can support a referral network that's regional in approach. And the work that we're doing is really around how government can include in their processes, sort of their administrative processes, the kind of contractual obligations for their provider networks that would require those provider networks to contribute information regarding services that are publicly funded into a referral network. So we're looking at contract language, and we are looking at data sharing agreements that we have with providers in the network regarding how their information is shared in the sort of the public domain and what type of information is shared. And as part of that, we are also looking at where we might kind of lean on providers to be more actively involved in how that information is shared. So rather than having the government agency do all the sharing, that we might be able to contractually obligate providers to update any kind of system that we end up utilizing.
Great. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Betsy to talk about the Honing Shared Vision discussion group.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm Betsy Bowman, and I'm the president of Benetech. And we had a group all about shared vision, and there were a few other name ideas for it: shared vision for collective impact, the North Star, getting to why. The whole idea being that, you know, let's make sure we hold a vision for broader impact. As Anne said, you know, we really started there with the whole convening and really making sure we're all obviously there to make a greater impact in the world. And we thought it was important to, in parallel to all the activities, actually have this sort of broader discussion happening. There was a keynote that, you know, we're not trying to be a steering committee for the project, but again, really kind of saying, where are we trying to go? So some of the things that we talked about really wanting to do is create a collective impact statement, we're really working together in a new way. So how do we really tap this brain trust in a strategic way to reach impact? This can help set some tone and direction and add guiding principles. So some next steps on our call, we'll start this, is really proposing a collective impact statement back to the rest of the group. Create some milestones and benchmarks. So if we're really trying to get to this massive impact, what are going to be some of the milestones along the way that we think we want to reach, and what are we asking all of our collective orgs to do as we work on this? And again, realizing that resource data that is such a critical first step to really getting to this bigger whole that we're trying to get to, whole WHOLE, not HOLE, and really make sure that we're kind of plowing forth in that direction in parallel to all the other activities.
Thank you, Betsy. And then for our last group, Lauren, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Lauren Klein. I'm the directing attorney at the Legal Aid Association of California. We are a statewide association of legal services providers, and we are kind of brought to this conversation because we operate a website called Law Help California, which is a statewide site for legal services. So in our governance discussion, we kind of took a look at what are going to be the operating rules and guidelines of this system kind of throughout the whole convening as various issues and problems came up that we discussed. Oftentimes, the answer to the question was, well, we're going to have a rule for that, or there's going to have to be some kind of guideline to control that. So we knew that governance would be very, very important for this project if it was going to be able to move forward. We talked about how the system of governance, whatever rules or guidelines govern this project, they need to get people to the table to participate. And we think that to do that, the rules need to be fair to everyone. They need to make the system useful and need to incentivize participation in some way. And kind of the other side of that same coin is that the system needs to be sustainable, and in order to do so, it has to have some of those same things. It has to have rules that are fair. It has to have guidelines that are useful, that get people to continue using and improving the system. So we talked about all different kinds of rules and guidelines that might end up being in place, everything from something as simple as what does an organization have to agree to in order to participate, to who's responsible for what on the system, what's allowed to come in, what's allowed to come out, kind of going all the way down into the weeds to much more specific things like what are going to be our standards for how data is maintained, and what are we going to do about differing levels of access to different kinds of data for different participants. And how are we going to deal with contractual or legal relationships that existing organizations already have with other providers or agencies. So that's all kind of overwhelming and a lot to think about building from scratch. So our next step was to kind of just get started, come up with a basic governance model. We think the governance system should be iterative, so we know that it will change and update as we go, but we need to get started. We need to have kind of somebody driving a first shot at it. So we're going to launch a pilot within 6 months of the meeting and move from there.
Thank you, Lauren. So as you all can see, there's a rich body of conversations that are coming out of this meeting, some of which will be directly applicable to the actual nuts and bolts of designing a system for collaboration, others that are going to be really important for the overall goals and way that we frame the work that we're doing and modeling for different types of collaboration. So we're really thrilled and excited that folks have signed up to continue those conversations. And so the next piece that we wanted to just talk about is that the design's next step. So here to address that is my colleague, John.
Hi, everyone. It's John Higgins. I'm a product manager with Ann on the Benetech Labs team. So I've been doing a lot of the data analysis in preparation for the convening, as well as running a couple of our small pilots with the open referral team in Florida and elsewhere, building software, trying to tackle some of the aspects of some of the problems we talked about today. So as Ann mentioned, we look at those outcomes that we came from the convening, as well as all the meetings we've been having with people outside of the convening to look for opportunities where software might be able to help move us forward towards a little bit better of a solution there. So the next steps here are drawing the lines, using the convening as the lines for potential new software solutions, and then coloring in those lines with some of the small group information that we just talked about, coming up with a few initial prototypes of software systems that we think can begin to address these issues. And then in the coming months, when we have those prototypes in a phase where they're testable, or at least able to get some information from partners, we'll be reaching out to the group to see who might be interested in joining a call with us to go over the prototypes, giving us feedback to inform our next steps and to see which of these prototypes we might take into a future more robust system.
Great. Thank you, John. So we covered a lot of material. We've done it very quickly, but we wanted to also say that there's plenty of room for folks to get involved. If you were not at the convening, and many of you who I think are on the phone now were not at the convening, there's still an opportunity to join the group. You can absolutely join one of the ongoing discussion groups. You probably have noticed on the previous slides there was contact information for the lead person for each of those groups for now, at least the person who is promised to sort of get the next conversation going. And I know that every one of those conversations, there's an active scheduling exercise happening right now to get those conversations in the calendar. We're of course always happy to receive feedback and to get your input on the work that we're trying to do together. We are putting together a Service Net mailing list where you can get information about things like this webinar, about our milestones, opportunities to provide feedback in a more formal way. We're always, of course, excited when you can help us spread the word about what we're doing, so that other organizations for whom this work might be relevant can provide feedback and join. And of course, we are already in the midst of identifying organizations who would like to be part of a small pilot of the system once we have been able to prototype it. And of course, as with all projects, support of any kind is always welcome. And so while there were email addresses in the previous slides, I want to just point out that you can reach any of those folks through us. If you contact servicenet@benetech.org, you'll get the team here, and we can make sure that we can help you with any one of those things, or put you in touch with folks that you heard from today, or others who may have been at the convening or are interested in doing some more in-depth piloting. And I also, of course, want to give a shout out to our friends at the Open Referral Initiative. If you want to learn more about Open Referral as a standard and some of the work they're doing nationally, you can join their Google group and or their Slack. Check it out at openreferral.org. So that is the end of the presentation portion of our webinar. We just want to make sure now that we have a few minutes to answer any questions that you may have. I know we've gone through a lot of material. If you have questions, feel free to either put it in chat, which we can monitor, or you have the ability to unmute yourself. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Not seeing or hearing any questions. So as always, feel free to reach out via email as needed. Oh. Nope, not a question. False alarm. Okay. As always, feel free to reach out via email and let us, so that we can answer any questions that might emerge or put you in touch with any of the folks that you would like to be in touch with. And we promise to keep this brief, so we will make this webinar recording available, send it out to the list of folks who've registered and also the list of folks who have participated thus far. And we thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. And we hope we'll be seeing you in one of these discussions.